Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Dare to Age Well Now. I'm very excited to be joined today by Ellora Pollard, and we are going to talk more about understanding how our bodies work. So, would you mind introducing yourself, Dr. Ellora?
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Ellora. I am a women's functional health coach. I help women understand how their bodies work. It wasn't until grad school that I really had any clue how my body worked, and it really started with understanding how my cycle works. And it kind of blew my mind that I got to the age of 23, and that was when I was finally learning how this thing that happens every single month actually works, and that it can be used as a metric for internal health so that we can tell about what's going on inside of our bodies based on the things that we're seeing outside of our bodies. And so that really inspired me to just keep digging, keep learning, and trying to figure out, like, what is my body trying to tell me from, what I can see and what I can feel and what's happening on the inside. So that's what I do.
That is fantastic. So, what I've seen over the last couple of years is that there are many of us that are beginning to experience perimenopause, menopause, and we don't know what's happening. Like, what is happening? And if you get on the internet, like, it is a fire hose of information, and it's hard to figure out what to listen to. So, how do you recommend people begin to thinking about this kind of season of our lives?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, perimenopause can start as early as 35.
Okay.
And I would say, like, foundationally, just figure out baseline how the system works, learning about the 4 different phases of the cycle. And then if you are trickling into the perimenopause years, then if you know, quote, what like normal looks like, then you'll know how things start to change. And then when you feel those sorts of changes go. And there are lab tests that can be done to help confirm that. One of the easiest tests to help confirm the beginnings of perimenopause and also menopause is getting a test called follicle stimulating hormone. And follicle stimulating hormone is a hormone that comes from the brain and it goes to the ovaries and it stimulates the follicles in your ovaries in order to help prepare for ovulation. And basically all of your hormones in general are chemical messengers that are just poking one organ from another saying, like, hey, do the thing, hey, do the thing. And as we get into perimenopause, your follicle stimulating hormone needs to really poke your ovaries to say, hey, do the thing, hey, do the thing, get ready to ovulate, do the thing. And so as follicle stimulating hormone starts going up and up and up and up, that's an indication that we are transitioning into perimenopause and then eventually menopause and then postmenopausal. So we can actually check that. So talking to a provider who can help you order some blood work is something that you can do in a doctor's office, but outside of that doctor's office, just understanding what, quote, normal looks like. And then if you've started to notice some changes about your cycle, if you've noticed different length changes, that would be an indication too that if you're in that age range and you're starting to notice some different things, you could be approaching the change.
Okay, we're gonna back it up. We're gonna back up the train. So, can you talk to us about the 4 stages of our cycle? Because I don't know that
Absolutely.
I could cite those off the top of my head.
I get that. Yeah. So if we want to break it into 2 halves, we have the follicle phase, which is the first half, and then we have the luteal phase, which is the second half. We can break it down even further. We have day 1 is the first day that you're actually bleeding. So that would be bleeding phase 1. Then we would have the part of the pre-ovulatory phase, then we would have the ovulatory phase, and then post-ovulatory phase. So you can kind of like break it down into chunks like that. And
Okay.
there's different hormones that do different things during each time.
Okay. Thank you. And then let's define perimenopause and menopause. Like, I hear them bantered about, but I don't know that I can clearly define what they are. So,
Yeah. So you'll see this, and again, we talk about being on the internet and seeing a whole bunch of different things.
mhm.
Menopause technically is 1 year and 1 day from your last menstrual cycle. And then after that 1 year and 1 day, you are now postmenopausal. You,
So wait a minute. So that means that the menopause, so the year that you're not having your period is not menopause?
it's technically perimenopausal. Yeah, but a lot of people will say that menopause is anything after you've stopped the bleeding. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I always kind of, that's the way I would have said my grandma would have explained it to me,
Yep.
is going through the change, right?
Yes.
And so, oh, okay, we've stopped 1 year and 1 day. So you're only menopausal 1 day,
Yep.
essentially.
Basically. Yep. That's typically what they'll say.
Okay, we got all these medical terminology. That is I literally have never heard it said like that. Maybe I just haven't spent enough time thinking about this. So then postmenopause is the rest of your life.
That's the rest of your life. Yep.
I feel like a seventh grader right now because I'm like, I feel like I should know all this stuff, and I don't. So if anybody else is out there going like, I don't think I knew that. I hope y'all are not thinking that I'm an idiot, and I hope you're thinking, oh, I'm glad I'm not the only one. So, I loved how simplified you said hormones are just messengers, and they're going from one organ to the next organ to say, hey, so it's a little bit like a project manager. Of course, that's how I'm thinking about because it's, the end of work day. I've been in project manager mode all day long.
Yeah.
It's like they assign a task. So
Yep.
one organ sends the message, sends the hormone over to another organ to say, here, do the thing. And okay, I just need a second because then like now hormones like, oh, your hormones being out of balance and out of whack, then that is why it's so critical, is because then your organs aren't being able to talk to each other. We have a communication problem. Houston,
Exactly.
we have a problem.
That's it. That's all it is.
I'm sure somebody else has explained it like this, but I love it because that is super simple. So then you mentioned that we could get a blood test that's going to tell us about our follicle stimulating hormone, which, by the way, never heard of.
I get that.
You're also very encouraging. Thank you. You're very sweet. But because you hear all about estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, right? Like we hear about those hormones and we hear about, adrenaline and all of these different mechanisms that our body, but it's so much deeper than that and more comprehensive. So I can get that one test, but what else would I be able to learn about? And I have lots of questions. Go ahead.
Fire away. We'll take them one at a time. We'll see what we're doing. But yes, all hormone stuff is a communication from one organ or gland or tissue to another one, and then once things start getting a little bit weird, then we can start picking it apart and go, is this a sender issue? Is this a receiver issue? But it is all a communication system within your body. But follicle stimulating hormone comes from the brain, goes to the ovary and says to the follicle to create estrogen. Estrogen is then, one of the more sexy hormones to talk about online. So we hear more about the sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone, all of that. But follicle stimulating hormone is one of those precursors before that gets estrogen to start being produced by the ovary. So if your estrogen isn't increasing, that won't trigger then it goes from ovary, then it goes back to the brain, and luteinizing hormone then goes back to the ovary and say, okay, do the ovulation. So we can ignore that. It's follicle stimulating hormone saying, hey, get the estrogen going. And if the estrogen is not being produced, that's when a lot of women will start to feel some of those like classic perimenopause symptoms like brain fog, having issues with strength as well, sleep issues. But that's because estrogen plays a role in all of that in other places and downstream.
Okay, so we have estrogen. I feel like I'm about to do like a Schoolhouse Rock question.
I love it.
So
I love Schoolhouse Rock.
So estrogen does different things. So it's not just it's not a single task. It is a multitask hormone.
It influences multiple tissues. That's correct. Yes.
Okay. And so because I'm like, wait, how does estrogen and brain fog and sleep and sex drive and all those things, like, wait, that seems like a lot for one little hormone to be affecting.
Yeah, definitely. And that's absolutely why women experience a plethora of symptoms when their ovaries are starting to go into retirement. And that's really what menopause is your ovaries are retiring. That's what it is.
Okay, so we were entering perimenopause because we're just in that tapering off. And then this is why it's important for us to get hormone tested. How do they know, though? Like, if I went in right now and I've never had my estrogen level tested, how do we know what it's supposed to be?
So there is a range for the whole thing we'll call the reproductive continuum. There's a range for before puberty, puberty in your fertile years, and then in postmenopause. There are levels for estrogen. And within those parameters, if you are too low in your estrogen during your fertile years, then there are things that can be done to help support that. But there is a range of like within normal limits for your blood work. And it's going to get a little bit stickier. I actually like to test estrogen in the Dutch test, which is a dried urine test for comprehensive hormone health, because I talk about estrogen like it's one thing, but there's actually different types of estrogen.
Okay.
And so it's the ratios of those estrogens that are also important, especially for women who have a family history of estrogen based breast cancer or uterine cancer or cervical cancer or any sort of estrogen based cancer, that we look at the type of estrogen specifically. So honestly, a lot of times when you go to your typical allopathic Western medicine doctor, they're going to test for like one type of estrogen and they're not going to get into the ratios of it. But if I test estrogen, it is the ratios that I look at, because there's different types of estrogen, and you can kind of call this like the good, the bad, and the ugly. And estrogen helps things grow. So if you have like the ugly kind of progesterone and you have a lot of it, and you have things that are growing, that's where things can be like a predisposition to estrogen based cancers in those situations. So getting a hormone test is good. I like the Dutch test best when I do my hormone testing. But kind of tying into something that we talked about earlier, just baseline testing, even just starting out with like a regular CBC panel, a comprehensive blood count, because your hormones act in sort of like a hierarchy, and your sex hormones are at the top of that pyramid. At the bottom of that is the cortisol and the insulin, and those have to be happy and healthy before your thyroid hormones can be happy and healthy. And those have to be happy and healthy before then your sex hormones can be happy and healthy. And while we can do things to support those sex hormones of estrogen and progesterone, the best thing that we can do to support those is work on the foundation, the bottom first, making sure your cortisol is happy and healthy, making sure your insulin is really good so that you've got a good healthy blood sugar. So before even bothering to test estrogen, I would test fasting insulin, because that'll tell us about blood sugar stuff. And then once that's happy, then I'd test maybe some estrogen stuff, do the Dutch test, that kind of thing. But follicle stimulating hormone, if you're in perimenopause or you're questioning if you're in perimenopause, I would order that in conjunction with a just regular CBC test and fasting insulin.
So I've always wondered what CBC was, because, when I watch ER or any of these medical shows, they're always like, CBC Chem 7. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. But it sounds... So when you said it, I was like, ooh, I'm going to learn. Oh, complete blood
Yep.
count. Okay.
Red blood cells and white blood cell information.
Okay. So it's just a broad spectrum kind of baseline of what we're looking for.
Exactly.
This is fascinating, and I am super excited, because my friends are probably not excited because I'm going to nerd out about hormones. And what I love is that this is a primer. So this is an opportunity for us to get connected. Where can people find you?
I hang out on Instagram at dr.ellora. And then my website is ladytimelearning.com. So that's the easiest place that people connect with me, on those two places.
Okay, fantastic. So they can connect with you on those places, and they can get those kinds of tests run. Where do you hang out on the planet geographically?
I am in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Okay, Pittsburgh. Okay. So if I'm in the Pittsburgh area, that's when I can get testing with you. I just want to make sure I'm clear.
That would be the easiest. If you are in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, you can come and see me at my office in person. If you're in the state of Pennsylvania, I can come and see, like, you can come in virtually and get connected with me.
Okay, perfect.
Outside of that, some states are a little bit picky with some things, but I can certainly say, like, hey, here's a list of things that I would talk to your provider about getting ordered, and then I can help walk somebody through teaching them about what those numbers mean and what more like optimal and functional numbers would mean, because I do have some coaching clients that I work with to, you know, make those modifiable changes, diet and lifestyle habits, that we can coach through and do that. But ordering the blood work can be a little bit picky depending on the state. A Dutch test we can usually get in most states, not all.
Okay. So I can work with somebody locally, but then I can, if I want somebody that has a podcast and a website called Lady Time Learning, means that it's going to be more accessible and easier for me to talk to you, then I can follow your podcast, follow you online, and be able to get some answers. So if you are looking for answers as you continue to dare to age well now, I hope that you will connect with Dr. Ellora Pollard. And until next time, dare to age well now.